The restraint collar on Cadet Pell snapped at the hinge, and the Velhari boy hit the deck with a sound like wet clay dropped from height. Staff Sergeant Alara Maren did not flinch. She marked the time on her wrist display, 14 minutes, 11 seconds into the 6th rotation, and crossed the name off her roster without looking down at the body. Pell was still breathing. The medics would collect him when the rotation ended. That was how the kill floor worked. Around her, the chamber screamed. 72 cadets had entered the Crucible Vault at 400 local, strapped into graduated resistance harnesses that increased kinetic load by 2% every 60 seconds. The floor beneath them was a 1,200 square meter slab of pressure-reactive alloy that hit back when you stepped wrong, a sharp upward jolt through the soles calibrated to the trainee's species-specific pain threshold. The walls cycled between blinding white and ultraviolet. The atmosphere was spiked with trace quantities of capsaicin irritant, enough to make the mucous membranes of most galactic species weep and swell. 26 cadets were already down, 26 in 14 minutes. Maren paced the center line, boots flat, spine straight, hands clasped behind her back. She wore standard Terran drill fatigues, no armor, no harness, no restraint collar. She was 5 feet 4 inches and weighed 121 pounds before breakfast, and every species in the room outmassed her by at least a factor of 2. The floor struck at her the same as it struck at them. She did not react to it. That was the point. "On your feet, Cadet Dren," she said, her voice pitched to cut through the haze without shouting. Dren was a Corvathi reptilian, teal-scaled, thick-limbed, built for sustained exertion in high-gravity volcanic lowlands. He had gone to one knee at the 12-minute mark and stayed there, his nictitating membrane sealed, his breathing a wheeze. "The floor doesn't care that you're tired. Neither do I." Dren pushed himself up. His scales had gone from teal to gray at the edges, a stress response Maren had learned to read during her first year as an interspecies combat instructor at Varathi Station. He lasted another 40 seconds before his legs buckled and his collar flagged red. 27. Above the vault, behind 3 layers of blast-resistant composite glass, the observation gallery held a row of figures Maren had been ignoring since the rotation began. Commander Solver Thane, Cephalopod Administrative Authority, Varathi Station Joint Command. Thane was mottled gray, six-tentacled, and possessed the particular brand of bureaucratic certainty that Maren had come to recognize as the most dangerous substance in any military structure. He had opposed the Crucible Vault program from its inception. He had filed 4 formal protests with the Joint Species Training Directorate. He had called Maren's methods, in writing, in a document she was not supposed to have seen, a primitive theater of cruelty imported from a Deathworld species incapable of distinguishing training from punishment. She had read the document. She had not responded. She did not respond to things that did not matter. What mattered was down here, on the floor, where the cadets were learning what their bodies could actually do. "Rotation 6 continues," Maren said. She stepped over a puddle of Chelrani bile. Cadet Mosk had voided his secondary stomach at the 11-minute mark, a common stress response for the insectoid species. The medics had sprayed a neutralizer and moved on. Mosk himself was unconscious near the east wall. 30 seconds to the next load increase. If you're standing when it hits, you're still in the fight. 45 cadets remained standing, 45 out of 72. The load increase hit. The harnesses tightened. The floor's response threshold dropped. Lighter steps now triggered the jolt. 2 more cadets collapsed in quick succession, a pair of Chelrani who had been supporting each other shoulder to shoulder. Their collars flagged simultaneously. 43. Maren watched a Corvathi female named Save try to adjust her stance. Save was one of the better ones, strong, disciplined, a clean mover. But her legs were shaking now, the tremor visible even through the scaled hide, and her tail had gone rigid, which meant her spinal column was locking up. That was the body's last defense before structural failure. "Cadet Save," Maren said. Save looked at her. The Corvatha's vertical pupils were dilated to full aperture, fight response, not surrender. "You're compensating with your tail. Stop. Drop your center of mass. Bend at the secondary joint." Save adjusted. The shaking decreased by half. She stayed up. That was the work, not breaking them, teaching them to find the wall and then stand 1 inch past it. Commander Thane did not understand this. Thane saw the broken cadets, the bile, the flagged collars, the medics cycling in and out like a trauma ward's rotation schedule. Thane saw numbers, washout rates, injury reports, recovery time, resource allocation. Thane's species had not evolved on a world that tried to kill them every morning before breakfast. The cephalopod homeworld, Solvari Prime, was a stable temperature ocean planet with no tectonic activity, no apex predators above 60 kilograms, and weather patterns that had not varied more than 3 degrees in 40,000 years. The most dangerous thing on Solvari Prime was a mild current. Thane had never been hit by anything that he could not committee his way around. So Thane did not understand why Maren's cadets needed to be hit by things they could not committee their way around. At 19 minutes, 38 cadets remained. At 22 minutes, 31. At 24 minutes, the harness on Cadet Voss, a broad-shouldered amber-eyed Drayan with 4 arms and the build of a construction excavator, locked at maximum resistance, and Voss went down hard, his chin hitting the alloy floor with a crack that echoed through the chamber. His collar flagged. The medics moved in. Maren marked the time and the name. 28 standing. The capsaicinoid concentration in the atmosphere cycled up. Maren's eyes watered. She blinked once, slowly, and continued pacing. "You are not dying," she said to the room. Her voice was level. "Your bodies are telling you that you are dying. Your bodies are wrong. You are uncomfortable. Discomfort is not death. Learn the difference now in this room where the medics are 30 seconds away. Because the places I am training you to survive do not have medics. They have gravity wells and atmosphere filters and predator species who will not check your collar before they open your ribcage." At 27 minutes, 26 cadets remained. That was the number Thane had been waiting for. Maren knew this because at 27 minutes and 4 seconds, the vault's external communication channel crackled open and Thane's translated voice, flat, precise, stripped of the tonal harmonics his species used for emphasis, filled the chamber. "Staff Sergeant Maren, this rotation will cease immediately. Washout rate has exceeded 63%. This exceeds the Joint Directorate's threshold for acceptable attrition in a non-combat training exercise." Maren did not stop pacing. She did not look up at the gallery. She keyed her wrist display and pulled up the Directorate's published training parameters, the ones Thane had co-authored, the ones that governed every interspecies training facility in the Varathi sector. "Commander Thane," she said, "the published threshold for acceptable attrition in a Crucible-class endurance rotation is 70% washout with 0 fatalities. Current washout is 63%, 0 fatalities. The rotation is within parameters." A pause. Maren could picture Thane's chromatophores shifting, the mottled gray darkening toward charcoal, which meant irritation in his species. "The parameters," Thane said, "were drafted before your modifications to the atmospheric composition and flow response calibration. Those modifications were not reviewed by my office. They were filed with Directorate Engineering on the 14th. Receipt confirmed. Your office was copied." Another pause, longer. "Staff Sergeant, I am ordering you to end this rotation." "With respect, Commander, you do not have operational authority over Crucible rotations. That authority rests with the senior training officer, which is me." Silence from the gallery. Maren turned back to the floor. 26 cadets. Some of them were watching the exchange, the ones with enough awareness left to process external stimuli. Good. Let them see what it looked like when someone stood their ground without raising their voice. At 30 minutes, the rotation ended. It ended because 30 minutes was the programmed duration, not because anyone ordered it to stop. The harnesses released. The floor went inert. The atmospheric scrubbers kicked in and pulled the capsaicin out of the air in under 90 seconds. 26 cadets were standing. 46 had washed out. 0 fatalities. Maren stood at the center of the floor while the medics moved in. She watched the 26 who had made it. Some were swaying, some were crying. A Corvathi male named Thresh had blood running from his nose where a capillary had burst under the harness pressure, and he was smiling. A wide, predatory, full-toothed smile that Maren recognized, because she had seen it on the faces of recruits coming out of the yellow phase endurance block at Fort Benning, a long time ago, on a world that Thresh would classify as a Class 14 death sentence. Hydrate, Maren said. Medical check in 20. Rotation 7 is in 4 hours, dismissed. She walked to the edge of the floor. Her legs did not shake. The floor had been hitting her for 30 minutes at the same calibration that had broken 46 cadets, and her legs did not shake, and she did not mention this because it was not relevant. She was a human. The floor was designed for species who had evolved in stable environments. For Maren, it was Tuesday. But she did not say that either. The formal review notice arrived at her quarters 6 hours later. It was signed by Commander Thane and countersigned by 2 members of the Varathi Station Administrative Council, both cephalopod, both from Thane's directorate. The notice cited excessive attrition rates, unauthorized environmental modifications, and failure to comply with a direct order from a superior administrative officer. It recommended immediate suspension of Crucible Vault operations pending a full review. It recommended that Staff Sergeant Maren be reassigned to non-training duties for the duration of the review period. Maren read it on her bunk. Her quarters were a 6 by 8 meter compartment with a cot, a footlocker, a desk, and a pull-up bar she had welded to the ceiling frame herself, because the station's standard fitness equipment did not accommodate her grip preference. The walls were bare except for a single photograph. Her old platoon, 23 faces, taken on the tarmac at Camp Hadley the day before they deployed to Kira's 5. 7 of those faces were dead now, not from combat, from training, the training they had received before deployment, which had not been hard enough, which had not prepared them for a world where the atmospheric pressure changed by 30% between dawn and midday, and the native fauna hunted by seismic vibration. 3 of them had died in the first 72 hours because their bodies had not learned how to function under variable atmospheric load, because nobody had put them on a kill floor first. Maren put the review notice down. She did not crumple it. She did not swear. She sat on her bunk and looked at the photograph and thought about the 3 faces in it who had died from insufficient training, and she understood, with the same cold clarity she brought to everything, that Thane was about to do the same thing to her cadets. She pulled up the station's tactical feed on her wrist display. The deployment schedule was classified, but Maren had held a security clearance since she was 22, and she knew where to look. Cohort 19, her cadets, the 72 who had entered the Crucible Vault that morning, was scheduled for deployment to Malachar 7 in 11 weeks. Malachar 7 was a border world, contested space. The Drayan Collective had been pushing incursions across the neutral zone for 6 months, testing response times, probing garrison strength. Intelligence assessed a 60% probability of a full-scale ground engagement within the next operational quarter. Malachar 7 had a surface gravity of 1.4 standard. Its atmosphere carried a natural irritant compound, a sulfur dioxide analog, that caused respiratory inflammation in most galactic species after 48 hours of unfiltered exposure. Its terrain was broken basalt and volcanic glass. The Crucible Vault was the closest thing Maren could build, on a space station, to the world that was going to try to kill her cadets in 11 weeks. And Thane wanted to shut it down. The review board convened 3 days later. It was held in the station's administrative conference chamber, a wide, bright room with a curved, transparent ceiling that looked out on the amber glow of the local star. The chamber was designed for cephalopod comfort, slightly humid, temperature stable, with seating that accommodated tentacular body plans. Maren sat in a standard galactic chair that was 6 inches too tall for her and did not complain about it. The board consisted of Thane, his 2 administrative council allies Subalter Kree and Subalter On, both mottled gray, both radiating the particular stillness that cephalopods adopted when they had already reached a conclusion, and a 4th member, Captain Drex Vasari of the Terran Liaison Corps, who had been attached to Varathi Station for 18 months and who looked, Maren noted, like a man who had been told he was going to watch a colleague get fed into a machine. Thane opened the proceedings. His translated voice was calm, measured, administrative. He laid out the charges: unauthorized modification of training parameters, excessive washout rates, insubordination. He presented data, graphs of attrition rates across the 6 completed crucible rotations, injury logs, recovery time statistics, a cost analysis of medical resources expended per rotation. Maren listened. She did not interrupt. She had brought a single data chip which she set on the table in front of her. When Thane finished, he invited her to respond. "Commander Thane," Maren said, "what is the deployment survival rate for cadets trained under the previous endurance protocol?" Thane's chromatophores darkened. "That is not the subject of this review." "It is exactly the subject of this review." Maren picked up the data chip. "This contains the deployment records for the last 4 cohorts trained at Varathi Station under the standard Directorate Endurance Protocol, the protocol you authored. Cohorts 15 through 18. 412 cadets total, deployed to border assignments across 3 contested sectors." She set the chip in the table's reader slot. The display wall behind her lit up. Cohort 15, deployed to Kira's 3 border garrison, 114 cadets, 31 fatalities in the first operational quarter. Cause of death: environmental exposure, stamina failure under sustained kinetic load, inability to maintain operational effectiveness beyond 48 hours in a high-irritant atmosphere, 27% mortality. The room was quiet. Cohort 16. Vithran Corridor Patrol, 98 cadets, 19 fatalities, similar causes, 19%. Cohort 17. Malachar 3 Forward Observation Post, 106 cadets, 41 fatalities, 38%. Malachar 3 has a surface gravity of 1.3 standard and a sulfur dioxide atmospheric compound that causes respiratory failure in unacclimated personnel within 72 hours. She paused. The numbers sat on the display wall like a verdict. Cohort 18, Dreshka Frontier, 94 cadets, 22 fatalities, 23%, total across 4 cohorts, 113 dead cadets, trained under your protocol, Commander. Thane's tentacles had gone rigid along his sides. His chromatophores were cycling between dark gray and near black. Beside him, Subalter Kree had shifted backward in her seat, an involuntary retreat posture. "The Crucible Vault," Maren said, "has a 0 fatality rate, 0, in 6 rotations. The washout rate is high because I am pushing these cadets past their known limits in a controlled environment where the medics are 30 seconds away and the floor does not actually try to kill them. Malachar 7 will not offer those conditions." Captain Vasari cleared his throat. He did not speak. "Cohort 19 deploys in 11 weeks, Maren continued. "If this board suspends the Crucible program, those cadets will deploy with the same preparation that killed 113 of their predecessors. That is not a training philosophy. That is manslaughter by committee." She stopped. She had said what she needed to say. She did not add anything. She did not soften it. The board adjourned for deliberation. Maren was told to remain available. The verdict came 6 hours later. The Crucible Vault program was suspended, effective immediately. Staff Sergeant Maren was reassigned to logistical support duties pending completion of the review. The board's statement cited insufficient interspecies consensus on training methodology and procedural irregularities in environmental modification protocols. The deployment schedule for Cohort 19 was not changed. Maren received the verdict in her quarters. She read it. She set it down on her desk next to the photograph. She looked at the 7 dead faces. She looked at the deployment schedule she had pulled up again on her display. Malachar 7, 11 weeks, surface gravity 1.4, sulfur dioxide atmosphere, broken basalt, Drayan collective incursions. She knew what was going to happen. She had seen it happen 4 times. For 16 hours, Maren complied. She reported to the logistics bay. She processed cargo manifests. She inventoried emergency ration supplies. She did the work she had been assigned with the same precision she brought to everything. On the 17th hour, she walked to the Crucible Vault. It was 300 local. The vault was sealed, power disconnected, access coded to administrative override. Maren entered her training officer credentials. They had been revoked. She entered the engineering access code she had memorized when she supervised the vault's construction. That one still worked because Thane's people had not thought to change it, because they did not understand operational security, the way a person from a Class 14 Deathworld understood operational security. The vault powered up, the floor calibrated, the atmospheric system cycled. Maren keyed the station's internal comm and opened a channel to the Cohort 19 barracks. "This is Staff Sergeant Maren. Crucible Rotation 7 begins in 15 minutes. Participation is voluntary. Anyone who wants to be ready for Malachar 7, barracks to vault, full kit, 14 minutes. She closed the channel. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then she heard boots in the corridor, 1 pair. Then another. Then a cascade, the sound of bodies moving with purpose, fast, organized, the particular rhythm of people who have been trained to respond. 41 cadets arrived, 41 out of the 46 who had washed out of Rotation 6. They were in full kit. They were on time. Cadet Save, the Korvathi female who had learned to drop her center of mass, was first through the door. "Staff Sergeant," Save said. Her voice was raw but steady. "Reporting for Rotation 7. Get on the floor, Cadet." They got on the floor. 41 of them plus the 26 who had survived Rotation 6, 67 cadets, strapped in, harnesses calibrated, floor live, atmosphere spiking. Maren paced the center line. The floor hit her and she did not react. The capsaicin had burned her eyes, and she blinked once and moved on. At 4 minutes, the station's security alert activated. Maren heard it through the vault's external speakers. A Priority 1 administrative override, Commander Thane's authorization code. "Staff Sergeant Maren," Thane's voice came through the speaker system, sharp now, the flat translation carrying an undertone that might have been fury if cephalopods expressed fury the way humans did. "You are conducting an unauthorized training evolution in a suspended facility. This constitutes insubordination and potential criminal negligence. Power down the vault immediately and surrender yourself to station security." Maren looked at the 67 cadets on the floor. They were watching her. Some of them were already sweating, already hurting, already in the first stages of the discomfort that would teach their bodies to survive a world that wanted them dead. "Rotation 7 continues," Maren said. She toggled off the external comm. At the 6-minute mark, the vault's external door cycled open. Station security, 4 Chelrani guards in tactical armor, pulse weapons drawn, entered the observation gallery. They were followed by Commander Thane himself, all 6 tentacles in motion, his chromatophores a storm of dark grays and blacks. Maren did not look up. "You have 19 minutes left on the floor," she told the cadets. "The people in the gallery are going to watch you. Let them. Stay on your feet. The floor doesn't care about politics, and neither does Malachar 7. Thane's voice came through the gallery's direct address system, bypassing the comm Maren had disabled. "Staff Sergeant, you are hereby relieved of command. Security will enter the vault floor in 60 seconds. All cadets will stand down." Maren stopped pacing. She stood at the center of the floor, 5 feet 4 inches, 121 pounds, the floor striking at her feet every time her weight shifted, the capsaicin burning in her throat, and she looked up at the gallery for the first time. "Commander," she said, "send your security onto this floor. They are not wearing harnesses. The floor is calibrated to full response. If they step on it without calibrated boots, the kinetic feedback will fracture their tibial joints within 8 steps. Your guards are Chelrani. Their exoskeletons cannot absorb the lateral shear force this floor generates at current settings." Thane stopped. The security guard stopped. Maren held his gaze through the glass. "I will not power down this floor, not because I am defying you, because if I power it down in the middle of a rotation, the harness release sequence will drop the cadet's muscular load to 0 in under a second. After 19 minutes of progressive resistance, that will cause vasovagal syncope in 60% of the non-human species on this floor. Some of them will seize. You will turn a zero-fatality training program into a medical emergency, because you could not wait 19 minutes. She turned back to the cadets. "Eyes front," she said, 12 minutes. Thane did not send his guards onto the floor. For 12 minutes, the vault was the only place on Varathi Station where something real was happening. 67 cadets standing on a floor that hit them, breathing air that burned them, wearing harnesses that tried to drag them down. And in the center, a human woman who weighed less than any of them, walking the same floor, breathing the same air, carrying nothing. 3 more cadets collapsed, their collars flagged. The medics, Maren's medics, the ones she had trained, who had been sleeping in the adjacent bay and had come running when they heard the vault power up, moved in and collected them. At 30 minutes, the rotation ended. 64 cadets were standing. 3 had washed out. The 26 who had survived rotation 6 held again. 38 of the 41 returnees, the ones who had come back voluntarily, who had heard her call and put on their boots, had made it through. Maren looked at them. She did not smile. She did not congratulate them. She said, "Hydrate, medical check in 20, dismissed." Then she walked to the vault door, where 2 of Thane's security guards were waiting with restraint cuffs. She held out her wrists. "Staff Sergeant Alara Maren," the lead guard said. His Chelrani was accented but clear. "You are under administrative arrest for insubordination, unauthorized access to a suspended facility, and reckless endangerment of cadets under your care." "Understood," Maren said. They cuffed her. The restraints were designed for species with wrists twice the circumference of hers. They hung loose. She did not mention this. As they walked her through the corridor, she passed the cadets who were filing out of the vault toward the medical bay. 64 of them, upright, moving under their own power. Some of them looked at her. Save looked at her. Thresh, the Korvathi with the bloody nose and the predator's smile, looked at her. Nobody said anything. That was correct. That was how it worked. You did not applaud your drill sergeant. You did not thank them. You survived, and the survival was the thanks, and both sides understood this without it needing to be spoken. Maren was held in the station's administrative detention facility for 9 days. On the 2nd day, Captain Vasari visited her. He sat on the other side of the partition, a clear composite panel that Maren could have punched through if she had wanted to, though she did not want to, and he looked at her the way people looked at someone who had done something they understood but could not say they approved of. The directorate is reviewing your case, Vasari said. Thane wants a court-martial, criminal negligence, reckless endangerment, insubordination. All three will stick, Maren said. The insubordination will stick. The others are arguable. 0 fatalities, 0 serious injuries. Your medical logs are immaculate. Thane doesn't care about the medical logs. Thane cares about the principle. I defied a direct order from a superior administrative officer on a joint command station. That's clean insubordination, and he's right. Vasari leaned back. You knew that when you did it. Yes. Then why did you do it? Maren looked at him. She thought about the photograph in her quarters, the 7 faces, the 3 who had died because their training had not been hard enough. She thought about Malachar 7, surface gravity 1.4, sulfur dioxide atmosphere, broken basalt. She thought about 67 cadets on a floor that hit them, learning to stand past the place where their bodies told them to fall. Because I'm the only one in this station who's been to a world like the one they're being sent to, she said, and I've buried people who weren't ready. On the 5th day, news came from the deployment corridor. A Drayan collective forward element had engaged a joint species patrol near Malachar 6, 1 system over from Cohort 19's deployment target. The engagement was brief, violent, and confirmed what intelligence had been assessing for months. The Drayan were escalating. On the 7th day, the deployment timeline for Cohort 19 was accelerated. 11 weeks became 6. On the 9th day, Maren was released from detention. Not acquitted, released. The charges remained pending. The review remained open. But the deployment timeline had changed, and the Joint Directorate had looked at the casualty data from cohorts 15 through 18, and looked at the 0 fatality record from the Crucible Vault, and made a calculation that was not about justice or procedure, but about how many body bags they were willing to fill. The Crucible Vault was reauthorized. Maren was reinstated as Senior Training Officer, effective immediately, with a formal reprimand on her record that would follow her through every assignment for the rest of her career. She did not care about the reprimand. She had 6 weeks. The next 39 days were the hardest of Maren's career, harder than basic, harder than Ranger School. Harder than the 18 months she had spent on Kira's 5, where 3 of her platoon had died in the first 72 hours, and she had carried one of them, Corporal Diego Fuentes, 23 years old, from Amarillo, Texas, over 4 kilometers of seismic terrain to a landing zone that turned out to be overrun. She ran 2 crucible rotations per day. She modified the atmospheric composition to match Malachar 7 sulfur dioxide analog as closely as the station's systems could simulate. She recalibrated the floor to approximate 1.4 G kinetic feedback. She built a supplementary course in the station's cargo bay, an obstacle run through stacked containers and industrial piping, with randomized kinetic deterrence and a timed atmospheric shift sequence. The cadets did not complain. They could not complain. They were too busy learning to breathe through burning air and walk on ground that fought them. Maren worked them until their bodies adapted or broke, and when they broke, the medics collected them, and when they healed, they went back on the floor. By the end of the 2nd week, every surviving member of Cohort 19 could sustain operational movement for 45 minutes in a 1.4 G kinetic environment with irritant-spiked atmosphere. By the end of the 4th week, 60 minutes. By the end of the 5th, 90. Maren did every rotation with them, every one. She walked the floor while they walked the floor. She breathed the same air. She carried nothing they did not carry. She did not tell them about Kira's 5. She did not tell them about Diego Fuentes. She did not tell them about the photograph in her quarters, or the 7 dead faces, or the sound a human body makes when it hits seismic terrain from a 3-meter fall after 48 hours without sleep in an atmosphere that has been slowly poisoning it since landing. She told them to hydrate. She told them to drop their center of mass. She told them the floor did not care. On the 38th day, Commander Thane visited the vault. He stood in the observation gallery, alone this time, no subalterns, no security, and watched rotation 19. 61 cadets on the floor, full atmospheric simulation, 1.4 G feedback, 30-minute duration. Maren at the center, pacing, voice level, boots flat. The rotation ended, 58 standing, 3 washouts, 0 fatalities. Thane waited until the cadets had filed out. Then he keyed the direct address speaker. Staff Sergeant. Maren looked up. The deployment transport for Malachar 7 arrives in 9 days, Thane said. His chromatophores were pale, lighter than Maren had ever seen them. In his species, she knew, that meant something close to what humans called resignation. Your cohort's readiness assessment scores are the highest this station has produced in 3 years. Maren waited. She did not acknowledge the statement because it was not a compliment. It was a fact. I have requested that the Directorate provide a senior training officer to accompany Cohort 19 on deployment, Thane said, in an advisory capacity, to oversee the acclimatization phase on world. Maren understood. This was as close as Thane would come to saying he had been wrong. He was not saying he had been wrong. He was saying that the numbers had changed, and the calculation now favored a different conclusion. For a cephalopod, for a committee species, that was the same thing. I'll go, Maren said. It is not technically within your current assignment parameters. I'll go. The transport launched on schedule. 61 cadets of Cohort 19, a logistics attachment, a medical team, and 1 Terran staff sergeant who had no formal orders to be aboard, and whose presence was listed on the manifest under the ambiguous classification of attached personnel, advisory. Malachar 7 was everything the intelligence reports had promised. The gravity hit the cadets the moment the transport doors opened, a visceral, whole-body compression that turned every step into a negotiation with the ground. The air tasted of sulfur and hot metal. The terrain was broken basalt and volcanic glass, a landscape of edges and unstable footing that shifted under weight. Maren stepped off the transport and breathed in. The air burned. She had been breathing its analog for 5 weeks. Her lungs did not care. Spread out, she said. Perimeter check, standard intervals, move. The cadets moved. They moved the way Maren had taught them to move, low center of mass, feet flat, weight distributed, breathing controlled. They moved like people who had been hit by a floor for 5 weeks and had learned to hit back. The first contact with the Drayan came on the 4th day. It was a probe, a skirmish element, 8 Drayan ground troops in light armor, testing the garrison's perimeter. The Drayan were big, 4-armed, amber-brown, built for the kind of sustained grapple combat that their species had evolved for on a high-gravity world of their own. Maren was not on the perimeter when the contact hit. She was in the garrison's makeshift command post, a prefab structure bolted to the basalt shelf, reviewing atmospheric exposure logs. She heard the fire. She pulled up the tactical feed. Cadets Save and Thresh were on the contact point. They were taking fire. They were returning it. They were not panicking. Maren watched. She did not move to intervene. This was not her job anymore. Her job had been to prepare them. The preparation was done. What happened now was theirs. The skirmish lasted 11 minutes. The Drayan probe was repulsed. No casualties on the garrison side. 2 Drayan captured, 6 withdrew. Maren marked the time. She closed the tactical feed. She sat in the command post and looked at her hands, small hands, scarred across the knuckles from a decade of training floors and pull-up bars, and the particular kind of work that leaves its marks on the body. The main assault came on the 9th day. Intelligence had underestimated the Drayan Collective's commitment to Malachar 7. The forward element was not a probe or a test of garrison strength. It was the leading edge of a full-scale ground operation. 300 Drayan heavy troops, supported by orbital fire coordination, aimed at overrunning the garrison and establishing a permanent presence in the sector. The garrison numbered 84 total, 61 cadets of Cohort 19, a medical team, a logistics crew, and Maren. The Drayan hit the perimeter at dawn. The light was the color of rusted iron through the sulfuric haze, and the basalt shook with the impact of heavy ordnance, and the air, already burning, already poisoned, filled with the sharp chemical stink of Drayan incendiary rounds. Maren was on the perimeter. She had no operational command authority. She was advisory personnel. She was also the only person in the garrison who had survived a ground engagement on a world worse than this one. And when the fire started, nobody asked to see her orders. "Hold the line," she said on the tactical channel. Her voice was the same voice it had always been, level, clear, cutting through the noise without shouting. "The floor doesn't care. The floor doesn't stop. You don't stop either." The cadets held. For 2 hours they held. Save anchored the eastern flank with a squad of Corvathi who fought with the cold efficiency of people who had been broken on a kill floor and rebuilt. Thresh held the western approach with a mixed squad, Corvathi and Chelrani working together, covering each other's weaknesses, moving with the coordinated precision that Maren had hammered into them rotation after rotation. But 300 against 61 is 300 against 61. Maren watched the tactical display and saw the numbers and understood the mathematics the way she understood all mathematics, clearly, without sentiment, as a problem to be solved or endured. At the 2-hour mark, the Drayan breached the southeastern perimeter. A concentrated push of 40 heavy troops through a section held by a squad of 8 cadets. The squad fell back. 2 were wounded. The breach widened. Maren was 50 meters from the breach. She had been moving between positions, providing fire coordination, adjusting squad dispositions. She was carrying a standard Terran sidearm and a tactical knife and nothing else. She looked at the breach. She looked at the cadets falling back. She looked at the Drayan pouring through, four-armed, heavy-armored, moving with the grinding inevitability of a species that had evolved to close distance and crush. She keyed the tactical channel. "All units consolidate on the command post. Thresh, you have tactical command. Save, cover the withdrawal." Then she walked toward the breach. She walked. She did not run. She covered the 50 meters the same way she had covered the center line of the crucible vault, boots flat, spine straight, hands steady. At the breach she picked up a fallen cadet's pulse carbine. It was a Corvatha pattern weapon, oversized for her hands, heavy. She braced it against the broken basalt of the perimeter wall and fired into the gap. The Drayan were not expecting resistance at the breach point. Their advanced troops were already past it, pushing inward. The fire from behind, from the breach itself, from a position they had already taken, disoriented them. Some turned back. Some pressed forward. The push lost cohesion. That was what Maren needed, not victory, time. She held the breach for 4 minutes. 4 minutes of sustained fire from a position that offered no cover and no avenue of retreat, against a numerically superior force, on a world with 1.4 standard gravity and an atmosphere that was actively trying to dissolve her respiratory tissue. In those 4 minutes, Thresh consolidated the garrison's remaining forces around the command post. Save organized the wounded evacuation. The medical team set up a triage station in the prefab structure's interior. The tactical picture stabilized. On the 4th minute, a Drayan heavy trooper put an incendiary round through the basalt wall 2 feet from Maren's position. The concussion threw her sideways. The heat seared the left side of her face. She lost the carbine. She drew her sidearm. It was a small weapon, Terran standard, designed for a human hand, effective at close range against armored targets if you knew where the joints were. Maren knew where the joints were. She fired twice. One Drayan went down, hit in the gap between thorax plates. Another stumbled, hit in the forward knee joint. The third, the one who had fired the incendiary round, stepped through the rubble and raised all 4 arms. Maren shot it in the face. The Drayan push stalled. The remaining assault troops pulled back from the breach to reassess. In the time it took them to reorganize, the garrison had consolidated. The perimeter had contracted to a defensible ring around the command post, and the tactical channel was alive with the voices of cadets who were scared but operational, hurt but functional, standing on a world that wanted them dead and refusing to fall. Maren slid down the basalt wall. She sat on the broken ground. Her left hand was burned. The incendiary round's thermal bloom had caught the skin from wrist to fingertip. Her sidearm was empty. She could feel the sulfuric air working on the burn, a deep chemical sting that cut through the adrenaline. She keyed her calm, Thresh status. Perimeter consolidated. 12 wounded, 2 critical, holding. Hold until relief. There's a response element at Malachar 6. They'll have our distress beacon by now. Copy, Staff Sergeant. What's your status? Maren looked at her burned hand. She looked at the breach she had held. She looked at the sky, which was the color of old blood through the haze. Advisory, she said. The relief element from Malachar 6 arrived 6 hours later. A joint species rapid response force, 200 troops, orbital fire support, the full weight of a military apparatus responding to a distress beacon that should never have been necessary because the garrison should never have been under strength. By the time they arrived, the Drayan had withdrawn. The garrison was intact. 61 cadets of Cohort 19 had faced a force 5 times their number on a world that was trying to kill them through the air they breathed and the ground they stood on, and they had held. 14 wounded, 2 critical, 0 fatalities. The number sat in the after-action report like a quiet monument. 0 fatalities. Maren was evacuated with the critical wounded. Her burns were treated aboard the medical transport. She did not require sedation. She sat on the gurney with her hand wrapped in a regeneration sleeve and her face half bandaged, and she watched the medics work and she said nothing. Captain Vasari was on the medical transport. He sat down across from her. Thane submitted a revised assessment to the Directorate, Vasari said. He recommended permanent authorization of the Crucible Vault program, full resource allocation, expansion to 3 additional Joint Command stations. Maren did not react. He also recommended that the court-martial proceedings against you be formally dropped. Generous. He cited your deployment performance and the cohort's survival rate. Maren looked at her wrapped hand. Under the regeneration sleeve, the skin was rebuilding itself, a process that would take 3 weeks and leave scars that would never fully fade. Deathworld biology. The body broke and the body healed and the scars stayed as a record of the cost. 61 cadets deployed, she said. 61 cadets came back. Yes. That's the only number that matters. Vasari looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded and stood up and left. Maren leaned her head back against the transport's bulkhead. She closed her eyes. She thought about the Crucible Vault, the floor that hit back, the air that burned, the cadets who had learned to stand past the place where their bodies told them to fall. She thought about Save dropping her center of mass. She thought about Thresh's predator smile. She thought about 41 cadets who had heard her call at 300 and put on their boots and walked into a room that was designed to break them because they understood, the same way she understood, that the room was not the enemy. The room was the teacher. The enemy was the world that came after. She thought about Diego Fuentes, 23, from Amarillo, Texas, who had died on Kira's 5 because nobody had put him on a kill floor first. She opened her eyes. She looked at the regeneration sleeve on her hand. She looked at the burn marks that would stay. Then she closed her eyes again and went to sleep, because there was nothing else to be done, and rest was a resource. And a drill sergeant from a Class 14 Deathworld understood the value of resources the same way she understood everything else. Completely, without sentiment, and without waste.